Prologue. A Coalition of the Crooked, November 2007.
Blank faces. Faces with no expressions. That's what I remember. About 20 of them had surrounded me and a few were pushing me. I asked them, "What is it you want? Do you know what you're doing?" I could see some had pistols. Beyond the locked gates of the courtyard, people were shoving and shouting. More crowds of students peered down at me from the windows of the floors that ran round the quadrangle as they tried to see what was happening. I was furious. My political party, Tehreek-e-Insaf, Movement for Justice, was allied to this group, as the students that had surrounded me were in the Islamic Jamiat-e-Tuleba, IJT, the students' wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami, Pakistan's oldest and most organized religious party. Both Jamaat-e-Islami and Tehreek-e-Insaf were part of the all-parties democratic movement campaigning for an end to General Pervez Musharraf's military dictatorship and the restoration of Pakistan's Chief Justice. Yet here these students were working for a dictator who had issued orders to arrest me and behaving just like a gang of street thugs. Although I had heard tales about the IJT, I had not fully realized the kind of people they were. Everyone on the campus of the university is scared of them. Once known for their ideological views and great discipline, they appear to have degenerated into a kind of mafia or fascist group operating inside the university, bearing guns and beating people up. They stifle debate in an educational establishment that has in its time produced two Nobel laureates. The University of the Punjab was established in the late 19th century by the British, in the country's second city, Lahore. No government dares tackle them. Ordinary students at the university are petrified of them, and even the party they belong to, the Jamaat-e-Islami, does not seem to be able to control them. Much later I heard the Jamiat activists had been paid large sums of money to turn on me, allegedly by the government. I knew the police would probably arrest me when I arrived at the university, so I sneaked in the evening before and spent the night in the rooms of one of the professors. The IJT had expected me to walk through the main gate the following day with my party supporters. Later on I discovered the plan had been to beat us all up. Two things saved me. I surprised them by appearing alone, and from inside the university, and the international media was there with their cameras all lined up. As soon as I appeared, other students in the university gathered around me and hoisted me up onto their shoulders. But then came this group of Jamiat students, about 20 or 30 of them. They began pushing me, but they did not know what to do because they had not expected me to come alone, and there were hundreds of them watching this spectacle. They shoved me into a quadrangle and locked the gates. That is when I kept saying, "What is it you want?" They asked why I had come without their permission, and I told them the university did not belong to them. I asked them if they realized their party's policy was to oppose the state of emergency Musharraf had declared, and yet here they were supporting it. "Do you know what you're doing?" I said. There was no response. I saw the head of the IJ standing about 20 yards away and speaking on his mobile. He was looking at me and clearly talking about me. I don't think he knew what to do. Some professors arrived and the Jamiat youths shoved them around too, and I could see the professors were scared of them. At this point I had been eluding arrest for almost 2 weeks. The country was undergoing yet another period of turmoil, and President Musharraf had declared a state of emergency. On the evening of the 3rd of November 2007, I had been giving a talk at the Lahore University of Management Sciences when someone passed me a note saying that the heads of all the political parties opposed to Musharraf were to be put under house arrest, including me. I had already been held under house arrest the previous year when President Bush visited Pakistan. That was aimed at stopping me staging a protest against the US president because of his hypocrisy in supporting Musharraf, a military dictator, while invading Iraq with the justification of installing democracy. So initially I was not too worried. Even under house arrest, I could still manage my political party. I finished my speech, held various meetings and returned sometime after midnight to my old family home in Lahore's Zaman Park, where my father and younger sister lived with her family. It was only when the police barged into our house that I began to sense a difference. Normally the police were very polite with me. This time their manner was more aggressive. There was no mention of house arrest, but rather of orders for my detention. I insisted they show me a warrant, and while they went off to get it, a journalist called me on my mobile. "Imran, I'm sitting with the superintendent of police here," he said. "All of the other political leaders have been put under house arrest, but you are going to jail. Your orders are for jail. With barely minutes to spare, I asked my nephew to check outside to see whether there was any possibility of escape. He told me that while the police had surrounded most of the house, they had left unguarded a 10-foot-high wall on the edge of our garden. I slipped out the back and sprinted for the wall, and my nephew helped me climb over into the garden next door. I had spent my childhood in Zaman Park and many of my relatives still lived nearby. While the police came in and searched our family home, even my father's bedroom, despite him being sick at the time, I made for my grandfather's old house and from then on began moving from place to place every other day. Every now and then I surfaced to give a telephone interview to the press to try and get my message out to the people of Pakistan, and specifically to my workers. Then I moved again. 2 or 3 times the police arrived at a house to look for me barely 15 minutes after I had left. Later, I heard that at least 5,000 people had been detained. I was one of the last of the leading opposition politicians who remained free. I had to organize my party as best I could by word of mouth, since we had all switched off our mobile phones and many members had gone underground. Benazir Bhutto, the daughter of the former President and Prime Minister of Pakistan who had been executed in 1979, she herself was Prime Minister in 1988-90 and again in 1993-96, had recently returned from political exile. She arrived in Lahore to organize a protest march, but the police surrounded her house and the plans fizzled out. She was, however, pursued by the international media, and I decided I should take advantage of their presence to give myself up with as much publicity as possible. The best place to do this was the University of the Punjab, the biggest university in the country, where I wanted the students to mobilize against Musharraf's state of emergency. My party, Tehreek-e-Insaf, was already popular amongst the students, mainly because of the stand we had taken against the military dictator. The young people of Pakistan were my main strength, and I had seen over the years how youth across the world had played a vital role in popular campaigns, from the anti-Vietnam War movement of 1960s America to the ousting of Indonesia's President Suharto in the 1990s and, yet to come, the Arab uprisings of 2011. I wanted the students to be politicized, since dictators always try to depoliticize people in order to maintain control. They and the international media would witness my arrest. I would not be taken quietly in the night. I told the students at the university I had come to give myself up and to take me to the police. They took me outside, pushed me into a van and drove me to the gates where a police inspector was waiting for me. He looked at me over and over again until I asked what was wrong. "I am so happy to see you," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. He made me wait until we had reached the police station and there he told me, "Since last night we have been in touch with these guys and my information was that they were going to hand you to me in such a state that I would have had to rush you to hospital. They were going to break your bones, that was the plan." He had stationed some plainclothes officers inside the university with instructions to try to save me, but there was little else he could do. It was only then that I realized how narrowly I had escaped. He was right to be concerned. A couple of years after my unpleasant experience with the Jamiat youths, they beat up one of the university staff, an environmental science professor called Iftikhar Balik, after he took a stand against them. I saw him soon after the attack, which almost killed the man and left him with broken bones and covered in bruises. My detention was to prove a formative experience. Time spent in a Pakistani jail only reinforced my conviction that a lack of the rule of law lay at the heart of our troubled nation's problems. After my conversation with the police inspector, I was taken to another police station and kept there until about midnight when they moved me again, this time to Court Lakhpat, one of the main jails in Lahore. At first it took some time to register what had happened. It was an A-class cell and I was given a room to myself, so I was able to sleep, and the next day I was allowed to sit outside. The jailers were very sympathetic and brought reports about what was going on outside. They told me that the day after my arrest there had been a huge and unprecedented demonstration at the University of the Punjab against the Jamiat thugs. The strength of the rally and the students' anger was such that for the first time in 30 years the organization was on the back foot, although it sadly regained its influence later on. I also learned that a mini-revolution had taken place in Zaman Park. My 85-year-old aunt, along with my sisters, gathered all the women of Zaman Park to stage a peaceful demonstration against my detention. It was unprecedented in my very conservative family for the women to come out and demonstrate in public. What happened next was also unheard of in Pakistan politics, where women are always treated with great respect. The peaceful protest was violently disrupted by the police, and in front of the national and international media, they were bundled into police vans and taken to jail before being released later that night. This incident dented Musharraf's liberal credentials. I was locked in overnight. On the second night, at 3 in the morning, I was sleeping when the cell door opened suddenly. A policeman was standing there, looking quite hostile. "Pack your things up," he said. "Get ready to leave." Then I was bundled into the back of a truck, where I would spend a 9-hour journey lying on a wooden bench, freezing with only a single blanket, as the wind and dust of a chilly November night blew in through the open slats. 3 policemen were sitting in front, and when we stopped for tea early in the morning, I asked them where we were going. They told me we were going to Dera Ghazi Khan, far to the southwest in the center of the country. DG Khan is one of the worst jails in Pakistan. If the authorities really want to break you, they'll send you there. It occurred to me that they might torture me, as they had 2 parliamentary colleagues, Saad Rafiq and Javed Hashmi, who had been jailed for years, and they had told me what had happened to them. But mostly it was the pettiness of it all that troubled me. It was unnecessary to send me on a 9-hour journey in a truck to a jail in DG Khan when other political leaders were being put under house arrest. I had been in the public eye for 35 years, and everyone knew I was not a terrorist. Yet I was being arrested under draconian, anti-terrorism, emergency laws that carried the possible penalty of life imprisonment or death. It felt like a deliberate attempt to humiliate me. And since the jailers and police dealing with me were generally sympathetic and polite, I sensed the orders had come from the top. If I struggled over just 8 days in prison, the suffering of the many thousands who spend years in Pakistan's jails was infinitely worse. And compared to them, I was treated like a king. The jail was dirty and crowded, with 10 to 15 people crammed into each cell. My own cell was in the hospital wing and had a little bed and a filthy bathroom, but I had a room of my own. During the day I was allowed to sit outside, although at sunset I was locked in my room for the night. I could hardly eat in jail since I had no exercise and the food was terrible. After so many years of sport, my body was conditioned to expect exercise. The worst of it was that time would not pass. I thought I was going to die of boredom. At dawn, when they woke me up and I heard the commotion of other prisoners being let out of their cells, I would try to linger in bed to make the day shorter. I would think I had been staying hours in bed, look at my watch and realize it was still only 8 o'clock. Then I would go and sit outside, and in the afternoon they brought me a newspaper to read. I imagined the whole day must have passed, only to realize that about an hour to an hour and a half had gone by. But still the day would just drag on. I am a completely outdoor person. I always have been. Even as a boy during the hot summer months in Lahore, my mother had trouble making me stay indoors. Since 2005 I have lived in my farmhouse on a hill outside the capital city, Islamabad, a place I call my paradise, recreating the sense of wilderness that I love. I am surrounded by hills and greenery with a panoramic view of Rawal Lake and the foothills of the Himalayas. I grow my own fruit and vegetables and keep chickens, cows and water buffaloes. Wild birds and animals surround me too, partridges, porcupines, snakes, lizards, jackals and peacocks. And suddenly I was stuck inside these 4 walls. In the courtyard, where I was allowed to sit during the day, there was a little bit of grass but not so much as a tree. The real problem was that I did not know how long I would be in prison. And I could not bear the waste of time. I had set up a hospital in Lahore offering free cancer treatment to the poor. I ran a political party, and I was trying to set up a new university in Miyawali, my father's ancestral hometown, over 200 miles to the northwest of Lahore. Normally 24 hours are not enough in the day for me. And here I was removed from life, watching time that did not pass. Yet jail gave me the chance to hear firsthand about the other prisoners. A young man from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the region formerly known as the Northwest Frontier, next to the border with Afghanistan, was sent to clean my room. I learned he had been there for 6 years after being arrested at the age of 16. He had not even been tried for the crime for which he was arrested. He had been involved in a family feud and had brandished a gun. That was all. If he had been convicted, the maximum penalty would have been a year. He had been in jail for 6 years because the family was too poor to afford a lawyer. When his case came up in court, the authorities did not even bother to send him a police van to take him there. According to the Deputy Inspector of Jails, Salimullah Khan, who visited me, this boy's case was not an exception. 60% of people in Pakistani jails were innocent, he said. Their crime was their poverty. Later, I began avidly reading newspaper stories about prisoners trapped in jail. In Karachi, the vibrant financial city on the Arabian coast, a man was found not guilty after spending 9 years locked up. When he was arrested at the age of 20, he had a wife and a year-old baby. It is hard to think about what might have happened to them in that time. In Sindh, the province of which Karachi is the capital, 3 men were found not guilty after 22 years in jail, and in another case a man remained in Lahore's Kot Lakhpat prison for 15 years because his file had got lost. That was the biggest impact jail had on me. Seeing these people crammed in together horrified me. Some of them had been framed. Often, I heard later, the head jailer made money by charging the relatives if they wanted to see a prisoner. And as was the case with the boy who cleaned my room, the police van meant to take a prisoner to court frequently failed to turn up, so they missed their court hearing. And yet many of the biggest criminals in the country were sitting in parliament, and some were even given police escorts at taxpayers' expense. The injustice and cruelty of it all stayed with me. The squalid conditions, the inability of the poor to get justice. I decided to go on a hunger strike on the 6th day to put pressure on Musharraf. But I made the mistake, if it ever happens again I would not do it the same way, of going on a complete hunger strike rather than just having liquids. I am used to fasting at Ramadan, it is excellent discipline, and normally I carry on as usual with the same exercise routine, but then you break your fast at sunset. I had not realized how quickly one weekend with nothing to drink. I had fasted for barely over 2 days when I discovered I did not have the strength to walk. Having announced the hunger strike, there was no way I was going to back down after 2 days. Then finally at about 8 in the evening, the jailers came and said, "You are free." I walked out into what became one of the most turbulent periods of Pakistan's history.